What on earth is going on with American politics? What a mess. Claims of a fraudulent election, the leftist libertarians are taking over, and Sleepy Joe, the president, signing off on executive orders and he doesn't even know what's within them. Why does this concern us in Australia, or how could this possibly affect us? Welcome to my cast. So firstly, I'd like to discuss the claims of a stolen election and the fact that there is a lot of evidence to support that is the case. We saw in early January that there was a bunch of what they're explaining to be MAGA supporters that stormed the Capitol building in the States, when the evidence now suggests that although, yes, there were some MAGA supporters that were involved, and yes, everybody condemns all of the violence that happened there, but it actually had been infiltrated by Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and other groups that are well known from the left side of politics. As a result of those actions in early January, news broadcasters and influencers that are described as right-wing nutjobs have been blocked or excluded from certain platforms. And they've been heavily criticised for allowing their viewers to hear the truth, as well as be able to formulate their own opinions based on getting their news from all news providers. Some examples of some of the supposed left right-wing news groups are Fox News, the One America News Network, or OAN, the Bongino Report, and Dinesh D'Souza. So what's happened now? People who sit on the right have lost the ability to have a voice, but they've also lost the ability to hear news that's relevant to their perspective on politics and what's going on in their country. There's no alternate voice. If the citizens only rely on the mainstream media for their news input, then they're going to be fed an opinion. The mainstream media no longer report news. They are biased by their own affiliations and connections. Further to this, we've seen the shutdown of Parler. A while ago, when there was a lot of conservative talk on Twitter and Facebook, and a lot of the people on those platforms were saying, we don't want to hear all of your right-wing nutjob stuff on our platforms, go and find yourself your own platform. So we did. The claim that was made by the left wing was that they cancelled out Parler because they were putting up propaganda that was inciting violence, and there was no evidence provided to support this. It was just shut down because they know better than you. And how did this happen? Well, there's only one way to explain it. There was a collusion between the big tech companies. We'll take a short break. I'll be right back. Okay, so welcome back. You probably noticed that there's been a couple of changes. I've had some software upgrades and also had a few things added to what I'll call my little studio here as well. So we'll get straight back into it anyway. Okay, so evidence of the stolen election. So you probably haven't heard about this because mainstream media is doing everything they possibly can to suppress a lot of this information that's coming out. So there's a gentleman in the States by the name of Michael Lindell. I encourage you to go to his website. It's Michael J. Lindell, LINDELL.com, and there's a 2 hours and 15 minutes worth of video evidence on there. It's called Absolute Proof. You really need to go in and have a look at that, and I will discuss the basics of it here, but it's 2 hours and 15 minutes worth of good evidence, and you really do need to go to watch it, especially if you don't think that the election's rigged, because this will show you to the extent that it actually has been rigged. Okay, so he's an entrepreneur. He owns a business that sells high quality cotton sheets and blankets and pillows and things like that, and he's also a political influencer. Because of his the evidence that he's been gathering, and the view that he has on what's gone on with the election, he's been actually attacked by just about everybody. He's lost some contracts over it. He's had his Twitter account shut down and a few other things as well. So this is very personal to him. He is a very extravagant guy, and he gets very excited about things. It's because it's so personal to him, and he's using the word correctly. He's a true American patriot. It's a must watch. It's very long though, and it has evidence to select that there's election fraud, and that has been all of this evidence that he's talking about has been removed from all of the major platforms, and mainstream media won't cover it at all. So if it's not true, why would you not cover it and say it's not true and debunk it and come back with facts to say that it's not true? But they haven't, because they can't debunk the facts. So the video is 100% proof that there was some interference. The basis of the claims are at the machines that they used to do the electronic counting, which was Dominion and ES&S. And there is evidence in there as well that the machines were actually designed for the data that gets put into it to be able to be manipulated, and we'll cover that a bit further on. They had a number of guests on, and the first guest he had was Colonel Phil Waldron, Waldron. He was in the Air Force from memory. And he was involved in influence operations and influence warfare. And his primary role was looking at vulnerabilities in systems, vulnerabilities with their own systems, but also looking at systems from other countries and looking for vulnerabilities from those systems. So he just did a very basic check of some of the data that had been that he could gather. And the basic data led him to believe that there were some major problems, and it prompted him to conduct a more forensic investigation. The problems that he noticed, that there was local problems with the way that people were feeding information into the machines, and there was video evidence of CCTV and things like that back up his claims. The machines themselves, they were easily accessed, and they had implemented no cybersecurity practices to stop people from interfering with these machines as well. And from a more strategic perspective, there's a linked ownership of these machines to the CCP, so China. That straight away should ring alarm bells for everybody. And the fact is that the only people that had access to the codes to manipulate the data is the people that own the machines, China, again. So you're going to say, oh yeah, well they've spoken about these sorts of things, and Donald Trump's tried to get all of these court cases, and they've all been dismissed. Well, that's actually not the truth at all. There are a number of court cases that were dismissed on standing or procedural reasons. So no evidence was even looked at. There was no discovery. It was just judges saying, I don't want to look at it. And they were making up excuses because they didn't want to look at it. And, in their positions of being exposed to this with the death threats that are getting thrown at people at the moment who are questioning the election, I can't blame them for not wanting to get involved. But it is their job to do it. So there's been no discovery. There's been no opportunity for any evidence to be presented to any courts. And what the mainstream media won't tell you is that there are actually two active cases in the States, one in Michigan and one in Georgia. And the judges presiding over those have allowed the cases to be continued and has actually ordered a full independent forensic investigations, and that will be forthcoming. So it's not, any right-wing nut jobs that are going to be doing it. It's people that are going to be appointed by the courts to do it. So you can't question the results that come out of that. And there is also, and I won't go into too much detail with this, if you watch the video if you want to know more about it, there's evidence, both, I'm fairly certain it was email evidence, that there's people within the Department of Justice in the States that are actively shutting down or attempting to impede any of these investigations. You'd have to ask why. Okay, you would have to ask why. If there's no evidence to support it, then let the investigations go, and then all of us so-called right-wing nut jobs, you can prove us wrong. More than happy for that to be the case. So his next guest that he had on was Russell Ramsling. He worked for Allied Security Operations Group, or Operational Group, and he a specialist in cyber forensics and security. He noticed way back in 2018 that it was strong evidence of voting fraud. He reported it to the authorities when he discovered it, and they did nothing. The media were made aware of it. They refused to pick it up. And that went on like that for a little while, and to the point where he approached DHS, Homeland Security, and made them aware of it. And they were absolutely horrified by what they had found, to the point where they saw a need to report it to their up through their chain of command, or their management structure. And in September 2020, so last year, it got reported up 2 levels of their hierarchy, and they were told to leave it alone. Why, when there's multiple levels to saying, yes, there is issues, we need to look into this, why does it get to 1 level and you get told to leave it alone? Again, if there's no evidence, then investigate it and debunk it. And there was also evidence found in 2 other states. So this is from Russell Ramsling. He discovered evidence in 2 other states, and they're not talking too much about that at the moment because there is a pending legal inquiry, and I would be holding it fairly close to my chest as well, because every time they say something about something, everybody just keeps trying to shut it down all of the time. He said that there's evidence that over 50,000, so 57,000 voters' details were altered after they voted. Why would that many people have their details altered after an election? And we'll talk a little bit more about that soon, where there's evidence, and there's clear evidence that people were enrolled in one state, voted, and then went back in, changed their details to another state, and voted again. Then he spoke about some malware. It's called QSnatch, and based in Germany. And basically what QSnatch was doing was records, or what it's designed to do, is it records all of the login credentials. So if you have somebody who's running a ballot room in one of the counties in Michigan, and they get given their login credentials and they type in their password and their user credentials, this malware records that. Why would there be malware out there that would do this sort of thing? It's because they needed to be able to alter it to suit their own purposes. So it monitors and changes and alters votes, and it's a massive security vulnerability. Basically, they could log into any of the servers that they liked and to any of the machines that they liked, and they could look at the data, which is all 1s and 0s, binary code and all that sort of stuff, and just change the code to suit their purpose. And again, I'll show you some slides soon about the proof that they have of that. And again, this has been reported. All of this information has been reported, and every response they get is, oh, this has been debunked. I'm not really sure that has any meaning anymore. And Russell Ramsling asked, when they said it had been debunked, he asked for, how was it debunked? And he basically got a response of, and that was about the only response that he got. So why? There's only a couple of reasons why it would be like that. There's just plain corruption, or people have been compromised. And we've heard all of the stories of compromise coming out, especially from the CCP, where people have put themselves in compromising positions, and the CCP have got evidence of that, and they're holding it over them. You could even think that, why are they not reporting it? Investigating it. Do they know that this is going on? Is America, is there certain aspects of the American government actively involved in doing this to other countries, and they don't want to look into it because it's just going to expose them? Again, that hopefully would be worst case scenario, but you'd have to consider that as well. What stands out the most to me with this is that they go to incredible lengths to silence and shut people down talking about it when there's absolute obvious evidence. The next guest that he had on was a Dr. Sheba. He was a scientist and engineer, and he actually ran for Senate. Very smart man, and he actually was the creator of the email. So thanks very much for that, Dr. Sheba. He ran in Massachusetts, and he was winning by a landslide, to the point where the campaign team had already started organising a party. He was winning by a landslide is the way they described it. So one of the one of the counties in Massachusetts, Franklin County, was the only county where they actually 80 to 90% of the votes were hand counted. And in that state, he was winning by 10%. Okay, so that's a fairly significant victory in the states. It's usually, in most states, it's a fairly close race. In every other county, which used these machines that I've just been talking about, in every county other than Franklin, he lost 60% to 40%. Not somewhere around 60 to 40%, exactly 60 to 40%. Now, mathematically, I'm no genius, but that's got to be impossible. That's a mathematical impossibility that in all of those states, and I would say, in those counties, there would be a number of counties, say probably 14 or 15 counties, probably more, that they all came back 60-40. Even if it's not proof, it's enough to warrant you to want to have a look, at least have a look. Okay, Dr. Sheba also went on that he's proven the state has deleted ballot images. And that's the only real proof of verification for those 60-40s that we were just talking about. So there's supposed to be a thumb drive, which is highly secured and tested that they work for a long time and they can retain data for a long time, kept on site, that has a hard copy of all of the ballots as they go through, so that if they need to go back and do any verification, they've got the actual copies of the ballots there. Oh, but they were deleted. Wow. Just wow. Amazing. Now, mainstream media, why would you ignore this? Where's your investigative journalism? Why are you not looking into these things? If it was something that would be would appear to be something that the supposed right had done, you'd be all over it. But because it suits your narrative, I guess, that you don't even want to look into it. Then he had another guest, Patrick Colbeck. He was a former state senator in Michigan. He's a Microsoft small business specialist, and within that area, he specialised in cabling design. He reiterated that something that I haven't discussed yet, that these machines were connected to the internet. And so if you haven't looked into this yet, these machines are not supposed to be connected to the internet because it exposes them to outside attack. And it actually was part of the overall agreement that they were not, or not agreement, it was litigated that they were not to be connected to the internet. And what it does is it exposes them to a man-in-the-middle attack. So a vote gets put into the machine, and what it should do is throw out a heap of ones and zeros that gives it the binary footprint of a vote that reflected that ballot paper. Them being on the internet, so that should just go from point A to point B, okay? There should be nothing in between. Having them on the internet actually creates a third option, point C. And instead of it going from A to B, it goes from A, which is into the machine. It goes to C, which is little Johnny sitting in the CCP. He changes it to suit their narrative, and then it goes to B. So it's been altered, and it will be altered. And again, votes have been altered. He then had on Melissa Cerrone. She was actually hired by Domain to assist with IT and to monitor the machines. Now, she worked over 26 hours in total. And she stated every vote she saw was for Biden. She did not see one vote come through. In 26 hours of ballot collection and monitoring and supervising, she did not see one vote come through for Trump. Well, actually, I won't say that because there could have been other votes as well. What she also observed is the way that they handle the votes when they were jammed. So we all know that printers jam all of the time. It's something that's going to happen, and even with a lot of maintenance, it's still going to happen. So what was supposed to happen is if something was jammed, they were supposed to take all of the ballots back out, cancel any of the scans that did make it through, fix up the pile of paper, make them all nice and flat so they go through properly again, make sure that the ones that went through have been deleted, and then rescan them. But they weren't doing that. They were just basically fixing them up, all of the votes that had gone through, and then they were scanning them through again. So they were supposed to do them in piles. I think it was 40. I might come to that in the No, okay, piles of 50. So they're not supposed to exceed 50. Each batch, as it goes through, is not to exceed 50. Now, she saw evidence that some of the counts of these batches were as high as 400. So basic mathematics, that's the same pile of 50 put through 8 times. She informed her supervisor about it. He basically said that he didn't want to hear about it. Lo and behold, her supervisor was a part owner in Domain. Now, he just turned around and said, we're not here to worry about that. We're here just to provide IT support and to monitor the machines. Now, why would you not want to report this? If you could see that your machines that you provided are not being utilised in line with legislation, that you set the machines up to support this, why would you not report that? And again, this has been made, she's reported this to supervisor, she's been to authorities about this, and have you heard about this in mainstream media? No, you haven't. His next guest was Matt DePerno. I've got a little bit of a snippet that we'll put up on the screen right now. And you'll see in there, and I won't go too much detail with it, you can see there's a number of columns. And the columns that they have there is that the original count, so that was the count by the Dominion machines or the ES&S machines, depending on what state you're in. And then there was a hand count. And you can see the massive discrepancies there. Machine count versus hand count. And in some cases, the votes that were on the machine count that were given to Biden after hand count, those votes were actually for Trump. And it's all there. You can see it for yourself. This happened in Antrim. And Antrim is a county in Michigan. And the people there are all very staunch Republicans. The majority of them are. And they usually, it usually wins by a landslide in the Republican vote. And the residents were quite concerned. They could see the counts coming through and they could see the Democrat vote getting higher and higher and higher. And so they raised their concerns over it. So they made some noise about it, and the more noise they made about it, there was a legal team that presented their concerns to a judge, and the court awarded permission for them to contract some expert forensic cyber technology technicians to come in and have a bit of a look at these Dominion machines. And part of the first thing that they wanted to do was to have a look at the thumb drive that I spoke about before that had a recording of all of the original ballots. That's supposed to have a chain of custody. It's a legal, it's like a legal document. There's a copy of legal documents. It's supposed to have a chain of custody, and they couldn't find it. They searched and searched and searched for ages, and they couldn't find it. And they ended up finding it in a drawer with half a dozen other USB thumb drives as well. So we all know that when something has a chain of custody, it has a chain of custody for a reason. So they know who's touched it, so that if they suspect that something's happened to it or it's been altered, they know who has touched it and they can speak to the people. But here it was found in a drawer. Chain of custody is totally broken, so therefore the images in there can't be trusted. And just to reiterate, those USBs are tested and rated for 22 months worth of storage capacity. They're not cheap ones. So the mainstream media and social media have been suppressing these issues. Or they state that the information is incorrect or not accurate, or it's disinformation, which is the word that we use at the moment. And my eyes are rolling back in my head at the moment. This is just absolutely unbelievable. Why not look into it? Why not investigate it? If you think that it's false, then you should have confidence to investigate it. December 6, 2020 in Antrim County, there was 15,676 events of voting. So that's just under 16,000 events of voting. When they went back and did a forensic check of that, Out of those just under 16,000, there was just under 11,000 errors. So that's a 68.05 error rate. And that just proves straight away, in that one county, 68, so nearly 70% error rate with the data that was being captured. It proves that the system's flawed. And it doesn't meet any of the state or federal laws. Not to mention the fact that some of the states and some of the counties just decided that they weren't going to follow the rules. They were going to do their own thing. It's a whole other discussion. So over the top of this, a lady by the name of Dana Nessel, who's the Attorney General for Michigan, she has actually put out a call within all of the attorneys within that state that she's calling for all lawyers who file suits against the state in relation to the election in 2020. She's threatening that she's going to disbar them. Why would you do that? I can't understand why, where lawyers are there supposed to investigate and try and find out the truth from both perspectives, whether it be a defence or a prosecution perspective. Why would you stop that from happening? What are they hiding? Why are they trying so hard to hide it? His next guest was Mary Fanning. She was a national intelligence researcher and author. She's been an expert in cyber technologies, and she's been gathering evidence since the 1st of November 2020. There's some good snippets of some documents that I'll put up on the screen throughout this, but I'll just start discussing them now. Basically, there's tabulated data that shows IP addresses. There's tabulated data that shows MAC addresses, which is actually the fingerprint of a computer. So I've got my laptop in front of me here. It has a MAC address. When I'm online, it records my IP address, and then it attaches my MAC address as a subheading underneath that to identify that within this IP address, which is my house, this computer is now on the internet. Throughout the rest of the columns, you can see that there's evidence of when these intrusions happened, where these intrusions came from, and again, it talks about IP addresses and MAC addresses, and it actually, on the end column, it shows you what the result of that intrusion was. And if you have a look at the tally, which will, at the snippet that will come up on the screen shortly, it'll show you exactly Trump down votes 22,000, things like that. You'll see that on there. And these tables that you're seeing on the screen now, there's thousands of pages of this data. There's terabytes of this data. So lots of it's being captured, and it was all captured in real time. And I'll show you a video right now as well of how it actually works. So yeah, you can see there now on the screen that it's what it's called an IP attack. So you can see that there's information going backwards and forwards from countries all over the world, not just China, from countries all over the world. And you can see packages of information being moved backwards and forwards, and you can see where they're coming from and where it'll zoom in as well, and it'll show you what states have been targeted at the same time from all over the world. So it's not like there's little bits and pieces. You can see there's a concentration that at that point in time, this state was attacked, and then a neighbouring state was attacked at the same time, and then it moves all around the United States like that. Very scary stuff. So why has this been allowed to go on? Why are we being told that there's nothing to see here, but then there's all of this evidence? And please, if you're one of the types of people that want to say that, this is all just rubbish and it's all been made up, debunk it. No one out there is looking at debunking it. I was actually watching a podcast on Bannon's War Room, where they are actually doing that themselves. They got Michael Lindell on, and they went through the video and tried to debunk everything, all of the evidence that he was bringing up, and he could successfully refute their claims that there was any way that this could have been made up. So you need to have a look at that one as well. Just don't sit back and say, oh, it's all a lie, it's all been made up, and then think, well, that's my job done. educate yourself. It's one thing that people on the left, they believe in collective thought. Oh, I believe this because somebody else told me it was so. The election was fine because the mainstream media is telling me that it is so. Challenge yourself. Do a little bit of investigation. Do a little bit of research. Why are they going to such lengths to shut us down? Why are they going to such lengths to make sure that we don't get this information out there? Corruption, compromise. Is the US government guilty of doing this themselves and they don't want to expose themselves? Why are they so against us looking into this? Now, this brings me to my closing point. Why cover this, Jeremy? This is in the United States. In Australia, right now, we don't have any issues with this. Well, I can tell you right now, as soon as the left and the media, mainstream media in the States started calling for shutdown of this conversation and this sort of conversation and any conservative conversation, there was a federal MP, and I would say that she would absolutely have been a Labor or a Greens MP, has called for similar censorship on conservative speech in Australia. So it's already happening here. It's already being discussed. The way I look at it is that we need to learn from the States. Look at where we are right now, and we already know that there's the cancel culture that's out there, and it has started in Australia, and it's been going on for a while in Australia. But we're probably about anywhere between 4 and 8 years behind the States in regards to this. We need to look at this now from our perspective and say, I don't want to be where the States is now. How can we stop this? And we can stop this, but we need to stop this now. We need to talk about these things. If I'm wrong, prove me wrong. If Michael Lindell's wrong, prove him wrong. Just don't say, we can't talk about it because you don't like the narrative. We've got to have a voice, free speech. We've got to be able to talk about these things. Anyway, so thanks for listening to my cast today. It's been a little bit drawn out. I will be expanding on a few topics that I would like to discuss about some politics in Australia, particularly Victoria, because they are far more likely to turn the way of the States. And I want to have a discussion about the problems that Conservatives are facing with our current setup of our political parties. There's too many Conservative political parties. It's weakening our vote. We need to condense back to the LNP, but make the LNP accountable for being more conservative, which is the true nature of what the LNP should be. Rather than worrying about getting votes and appeasing other people, they need to come back to a more traditional LNP. Anyway, thanks for listening to the cast today. I am on YouTube, Rumble. I do audio podcasts on all of the more popular ones. Please go in, have a look. The more following I get, the more likes I get. Please comment, even if it's a negative comment. You know, I'd love to have that discussion. Again, would love to have that discussion because we need to have the discussion. More than happy to have discussions with people. More than happy to have people phone in on my cast if they want to talk about something. That's fine as well. So again, please follow me any of the platforms that you can, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.